Hello and welcome to this webinar titled Biopharmaceutical Process Model Evolution, Enabling Process Knowledge Continuum from an Advanced Process Control Perspective, hosted by Biopharma Asia magazine and presented by Saly Romero-Torres, Senior Manager of Advanced Data Analytics at Biogen. This presentation will be followed by an industry perspective presented by David Lovett, Managing Director, and John Mack, Engineering Director at Perceptive Engineering. My name is Stephen Edwards, and I will be your moderator. Before we begin, I would just like to inform our viewers that there will be a live question and answer session after both presentations near the end of the webinar. Audience members can send their questions in at any time during the webinar via the questions tab located directly below your webinar screen, and we will go through these at the end of the webinar. Now please allow me to introduce our first presenter. Dr. Romero-Torres is a Senior Manager of Advanced Data Analytics at Biogen, where she leads a team of mathematicians, statisticians, and advanced process control engineers. She has over 15 years of experience in the field of process analytical technologies and advanced manufacturing of biopharmaceuticals, with a focus in the use of advanced sensors, advanced process control, data analytics, machine learning, and operational excellence tools. She obtained a doctorate in pharmaceutical PAT from Purdue University in 2006 and has worked for companies such as Schering-Plough, Wyeth, and Pfizer. In 2014, Dr. Romero-Torres founded BioHyperplane LLC, a data analytics and consultation company. At BioHyperplane LLC, Romero-Torres worked with a broad portfolio of industries, including biopharma, automation software, semiconductors, data analytics software, and instruments. Her personal mission is advancing pharmaceutical manufacturing processes to enhance plant operations and, more importantly, improving patients' access to critical therapies. I will now be handing over to our first presenter. Welcome, Dr. Romero-Torres.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Thanks for the invitation to present to this forum first. And during this talk, I will be discussing Biogen's philosophy around modeling and advanced process control evolution based on knowledge maturity. So hope you'll enjoy it. This philosophy was published last year in the American Pharmaceutical Review Journal for those who are interested, and it was written as a joint effort between Biogen's manufacturing sciences and regulatory departments. So today, I will go over some themes and concepts that are essential in our journey towards modeling for advanced process control. And some of these topics are how to include modeling as part of your culture, the term of modeling complexity, some regulatory expectations, what is advanced process control and how we are defining it. I'll talk about the pharmaceutical modeling continuum, which is what we have created, and that's our philosophy. I'll discuss model impact. I'll talk about modeling across modalities and complexities. I'll show a knowledge and modeling continuum. I'll touch upon the impact that ICH Q12 should play into the utilization of these new technologies, and I'll provide some closing remarks. So first, let's talk about modeling as part of your culture. Incorporating modeling within our culture is a very interesting challenge, and when I say our culture, I'm talking about our pharma culture, as we need to move away from making decisions on limited and independent data to making decisions based on relationships that in many cases are in more than 3 dimensions. And more than 3 dimensions is higher than what our senses can process. Another important cultural shift in pharma is referring and treating the process as a system, which can operate at multiple states, leading to a range of outputs, and that within the boundaries, you can have infinite continuous possibilities. Thus, moving away from the discrete mentality will be very crucial when making this cultural change, because the reductionist approach to seek one-on-one relationships doesn't work to describe systems, particularly complex systems. Also, in such a prescribed industry, it is sometimes hard to explain that variation and variable importance are all relative terms. And this is particularly true when working with machine learning approaches. So this is why modeling will represent a shift in culture and will require a different way of thinking and skill sets, not to mention an integrated data infrastructure and management. So when embarking in this journey, we have to keep in mind that modeling for control is not a single task, and it is a discipline, it's a field, and it needs the appropriate skill sets and competency model. Quick data analytics and data set description is relatively easy, but to generate process models, the modeler needs to understand the process and the overarching control strategy of that product. And this will dictate the expected operational space and data variation. Thus, building models for process control and quality decision is complex. It will require time, it will require effort and an investment, and also a cross-disciplinary team that speaks roughly the same language. These are some of the regulatory expectations or guidelines around modeling based on application, risk, and process knowledge. They all mention that for process control and quality decisions, a data-driven approach alone is not sufficient, and it could actually be risky. Thus, we have to be careful when proposing machine learning models to control processes without backing up the variables and model structure with causalities or first principles. As an example, the PAT guidance states that based on the estimated risk, and this will be related to model impact, and I'll talk about model impact later, a simple correlation function may need further support or justification, such as mechanistic explanation of causal links among the process, material measurements, and target quality specification. And the reasons for these regulatory requirements is that the risk is inversely proportional to knowledge, and that pharma has traditionally operated below 3 sigma levels. So according to ICH Q8, Q9, and Q10 questions and answers documents, models can be categorized in multiple ways for the purpose of regulatory submissions. Their category will depend on their contribution to assure the quality of the product. In this particular model, low-impact models is referred when a model inadequacy cannot directly lead to a batch failure. A medium-impact model is when a model inadequacy or malfunction may lead to a batch failure, but other tests or controls are in place. So there's no impact to the patient, and the product will not be placed in the market. A high-impact model is when a model inadequacy may impact patients. So you can see here that the strictness of model validation and overall management will have to depend on its category. Before discussing our modeling evolution approach, I want to norm on some of the definitions that we are using for advanced process control to avoid confusion. At Biogen, we have adopted automation engineering APC terminology, where we are defining APC as model-based process control plus fault detection and classification. And this is the same definition used by other high-tech industries, such as semiconductors. Language alignment in the company was an imperative for us too, in order to align expectations within the company and also to learn from other industries which are more mature than we are. In this definition, both model-based process control and the fault detection components will utilize a series of models that will serve different purposes and will represent different levels of operational spaces, from the normal operation region to the knowledge space. And that is why APC is so tightly related to modeling. So what is a fault? A fault is defined as a change in the variation of a system away from common noise. The easiest way of using models for multivariate fault detection is by employing unsupervised models that represent good operational spaces. And these spaces are analogous to your proven acceptable ranges. The automation mechanism is done through process condition monitoring, where you monitor your process in real time and determine when the process is out of univariate or multivariate statistical control. And here we have an example using bilinear modeling. You can also develop sub-sensors to generate supervised fault detection strategies that link the health of the state and the state of the process to its final outcome or output. Sub-sensors are models as well, and they are used to estimate unmeasured or unmeasurable process outputs or outcomes. They can use machine learning or they can use fundamental models. This slide here is just to depict how a fault will look like from a univariate and multivariate perspective. The green traces in the top right graph show typical pH trajectories, and the red trace is a faulty trajectory. The black trace in the bottom right graph show a batch evolving outside of common process noise in a multivariate space. And the green trace in the multivariate in the multivariate fault detection is a typical multivariate trajectory. For data-derived sensors, you may need more data or information from the process than just the typical operating region. This information will be needed to expand the outcome or output range enough so that we can actually identify a model. The last holy grail of APC is model-based process control, where instead of controlling the process to hard set points, you adjust your process set points depending on your process state and optimization functional. For this, you will need to have a forecasting model that give you an idea of your future process outcome or output if you keep on manufacturing in the same fashion. Model-based process control has been described as a chess match between the process condition and the controller in an attempt to improve the outcome of the process within process constraints. Model-based process control enables self-optimization, embedding true intelligence into the process. In order to build a model predictive controller, we will need a thorough characterization of the manufacturing space and input-output relationship, as well as process constraints and actuation capability. The difficulty of a model-based process control strategy will increase with system complexity and variable interactions. Model-based process controls tend to be only cost-effective for products that are manufactured with high frequency. And where do advanced control strategies reside within our automation architecture? They will reside in the second layer of the ISI 95 standard, which is a supervisory layer connected all the way to the HMI. In ICH Q12 terms, simple feedback control strategies will reside in level 1 and will enable parameter-based control approaches, where more intelligent strategies will be called enhanced or performance-based approaches and will be in level 2. Your level 2 strategies will have fault detectors, sub-sensors, forecasters, and optimizers. This is a very simple modeling for APC maturity map, where we have listed all the control strategies that we can employ depending on the level of available data or scientific knowledge. On the first layer of our map, we have our fault detection strategies that tell us if we are within or outside statistical control or predetermined conditions. This layer also helps us to determine if we can trust our advanced control directives or if we should override the system. The second layer is our soft sensors. These strategies will help to estimate process variables or outcomes based on initial conditions or other state variables. In the third layer, we have fault classification strategies, where a library of faults or expert systems are used to classify the nature of the faults and assign possible root causes in support of process recovery. The fourth layer is our real-time process optimizer that will prescribe new set points into our control system to improve the chances of optimal outcome. The higher the level of intelligence in our control strategy, the higher the level of required process understanding and modeling complexity. Thus, the level of effort and investment needs to justify the cost of the development and ownership. This maturity map is very similar to the ones proposed by companies supporting and adopting big data solutions as well as semiconductor automation practices. Different modeling approaches are used to characterize or control the process, from fault detection to optimizers, as we already mentioned. At Biogen, system or process complexity and model reliability are being leveraged when deciding model intended use. For complex processes or processes with a high number of degrees of freedom, a strong focus is given to manufacturing consistency and supply chain reliability, and not so much to quality analysis lead time reduction, or what other folks refer as real-time release testing. The higher the complexity of the process, the more difficult it will be to describe it using models. Here to the right, we have an example of two systems. One describes the simple solubility of crystalline material in solvent, and the other one shows some of the different equations used to describe a fed batch penicillin production. So you can see that the number of equations and terms will increase with system complexity. Modeling activities are tied to the knowledge continuum, and just like knowledge, process models, and applicability within and outside the automation architecture will evolve with time and experience. This means that intelligence embedded in a control strategy should evolve with time and knowledge. When you don't have enough data or knowledge, you can only use descriptive approaches, and you will need more regulatory oversight when proposing post-approval changes. As you start deriving more knowledge, your control strategy should be more optimal and flexible from a regulatory perspective. Thus, a plan for model evolution and evolutionary intended use is going to be very critical to achieve control and process intelligence. So how can we evolve control strategies once we have filed a process? So for this, we're counting on ICH Q12 guidelines, which is expected to create a regulatory path to adopt these new technologies as they evolve. ICH Q12 should enhance the management of post-approval changes and the transparency between the industry and the regulatory authorities, leading to innovation and continual improvement. ICH Q12 contains the following tools and enablers to support a harmonized lifecycle management. Some of these are established conditions, categorization of post-approval changes, and post-approval change management and protocols. The tools that will be the most effective to support future innovations are established conditions and post-approval protocols. These two tools will provide more flexibility with regards to which process changes will need regulatory approval and how do we manage control changes as we gain more understanding about the effectiveness of our initially filed control strategy. So these are some closing remarks. Hopefully you have seen that data packages and knowledge used to identify or generate models are in constant evolution. And models can have very different intended uses depending on the available data package, knowledge level, and modeling strategy. The intended use will define what kind of actions can be taken based on the model results, as well as the needed level of system understanding. Understanding the difference between complex versus simple systems and treating them differently, in other words, aligning expectation and design to the level of system complexity, is key to define intended use and business case. Our recommendation is that we strive to realize much more than quality analysis lead time reduction, because mitigating supply chain risks through visibility and disruption management brings tremendous value and can employ models that are categorized low to medium impact. Does this offer lower risk but high value? So thank you so much for your time. Hopefully this was productive, and I would like to pass again the presentation to Stephen. Thanks.
Thank you for that great presentation. Now, before I introduce our next presenters, David Lovett and John Mack, once again, I would like to remind our viewers that there will be a live question and answer session at the end of the webinar. Please feel free to send in your questions at any time during the webinar via the questions tab located directly below your webinar screen, and we'll go through these at the end of the presentation. Now, please allow me to introduce our second speakers. David Lovett is on the board of a variety of process industry steering groups, including the Innovation Strategy Team and Process Control and Analytical Measurements Apprenticeship Scheme. Perceptive expanded into Asia, Singapore, in 2012, where David has developed with the company with partners such as Pfizer, GSK, Unilever, and Abbott Nutritionals to be recognized as one of the leading advanced process control companies in the region. Having recently published in the parliamentary review the benefits of government investment in manufacturing within the process industries and the need for a collaborative engagement as demonstrated through the AM-SCI projects, he continues to push for greater government support on Industry 4.0 initiative. He will also be joined by John Mack, who has recently published numerous technical articles including Improving Quality and Profitability with Evaporators and Dryers Using Advanced Control Technology, Adaptive on Online Moisture Control of Flash Drying Processes, an Econometric Approach to Justifying Advanced Process Control Projects, an Integrated Approach to Advanced Process Control with Process Monitoring, and Statistical Process Monitoring of Industrial Batch Processes. John is a founding member of Perceptive Engineering. He is Chartered Engineer with a BEng and NZCE from Auckland University and 17 years of experience delivering industrial advanced process control and multivariate monitoring solutions. John is the Engineering Director for the UK office. His role is to support the team delivering APC and optimization systems in the paper, nutritional powders, water treatment, and pharmaceutical industries. I will now be handing over to our second presenter. Welcome, David and John.
Thanks, Stephen, for the introduction, and thank you, Sally, for giving a very wide-reaching overview of modelling, and particularly the importance of the terminology, standards, and understanding of criticality of models in product development and subsequent manufacturing. So my task really is to start off with just let me introduce very briefly Perceptive Engineering. We design, develop, and commission advanced process control systems in the pharmaceutical and complex formulated product sectors. Our software platform is used for data-driven modeling, product and process analysis, model predictor control in batch and continuous processes. We use both within product development centres and manufacturing facilities. So what I'd like to cover in this short presentation is just some examples of different models that we use within advanced process control solutions that we've developed and have been applied to pharmaceutical processes. As described by Sally, there is certainly a developing set of terminology which is used across the many collaborating disciplines that are developing and manufacturing pharmaceutical products. And through this particular presentation, I hope to give one or two specific examples. So linking with Sally's theme, I've taken the slide that Sally was showing on model maturity, and also I'd like to reference the ISP's definition of model impact levels. There's an article called Scientific and Regulatory Considerations for Implementing Mathematical Models in the QBD Framework, that slips off the tongue, is well worth looking at. And in this slide, you can see that we've added to it, we've kind of categorized the models that we frequently see in advanced process control, and we've classified them into the low, medium, and high impact categories that have been defined. So I'd like to look at two examples. where there are a variety of models that are used to deliver advanced process control solutions to the pharmaceutical industry. But before I step into that first example, I just want to give a shout out to the ADOPT project, which is the Advanced Digital Design of Pharmaceutical Therapeutics. It was a project that's generated lots and lots of models from mechanistic, statistical, and hybrids. And it also has included the aggregation and interpretation of big data for both the design and manufacturing of pharmaceutical therapeutics. The ADOPT partnership was primarily covered small molecule models. However, a subsequent program is starting to look at large molecule, and the ADOPT website is a really good reference source to go to. So the first example, it concerns the ubiquitous bioreactor and the challenges of controlling and monitoring these systems. So in the next 3 slides, we will show 3 model types that are used, firstly to measure, then to control, and finally monitor the behavior of the bioreactor to ensure that the yield and quality and the overall equipment effectiveness are maintained. So when we build a control and monitoring system, we try to consider the integrated aim of the controller and the monitor together. What do I actually mean by this? So the challenge you get is if you have a closed loop control system that's doing its job well, then the process will remain on target even when it's subjected to many different disturbances. How do you actually see if something is going wrong, even when all the process values appear to be where they should be? So the answer is to ensure that when you develop the process monitor around the controller, and the process monitor is often a multivariate model within a fault detection system, you try to ensure that the monitor is looking at the behavior of the actuators, not only focused on the process variables that are being controlled. So are the actuator patterns consistent, and if not, why not? So let's look a little bit more detail and consider the model impact as we do so in looking at each of these 3 models. Firstly, the calibration model. So it's developed from analytical instrument data, often spectral, and it's used to estimate the measurement of interest measured in engineering units. So you'll see in the picture here, you've got examples of Raman and NR spectra used to determine biomass growth and penicillin concentration. So in this example, the calibration models are developed using chemometric methods to give estimates with their associated uncertainty limits. So these measurements are used in real time within the control system to maintain the desired biomass growth and penicillin yield. Typically, they are considered to be medium impact models, which means they are used to directly affect the growth and the yield within the control system. They are actually measuring those parameters. So if a model and any of the associated pre-processing is wrong, the control system will be using wrong information. But only if the measurement is actually used for real-time release would it be critical high-impact model. Otherwise, it would be considered as a medium-impact model. So, secondly, now consider a control model. And the control model is often embedded within the control system. The model, again, it's often an input-output time series incremental model. There's a lot of words there, but those are the kind of models we use, and they allow the control system to rapidly investigate different control actions and determine the future effect of making those control actions. So all the adjustments that are made by the control system can be, and usually are, limited by the setup of the controller. So in this example that you can see, the objective of the controller is to do whatever it can do, but is also whatever it is allowed to do to keep the biomass growth and subsequent penicillin concentration at the desired target profile values through the batch. So this kind of set point tracking model predictor control system ensures that the error from target is minimized all the way through the duration of the batch. Again, in terms of model impact, the model is used in real time to control the batch for optimal business benefits. It's classified as a medium impact model. And it's always worth pointing out, if you are doing advanced process control and you're using models to improve performance of the system, it makes sense to automatically calculate the benefits associated with that whole system. And one comment I'd make is be very critical of cherry-picking best results when you're making comparisons between systems. A good model and control system should be used when the process problem warrants it. Or if you want to have a greater understanding of the process or detect abnormal events, then you can use these kind of models. You have to question when a model is to be used and is it appropriate to go to that depth. So thirdly, and the final of the three models, let's look at this, the example of a model being used to monitor. So many biopharmaceutical companies now rely on multivariate data analysis to help efficiently monitor the broad range of process measurements, mainly to provide fast and reliable detection of process faults. Now, as it can be seen in the diagram, there are multiple batch runs which all achieve consistent biomass targets and penicillin yields. So you look on the left-hand side, the overlaid trends there. However, the multivariate monitor identifies unusual conditions within the process. So the monitor is working and looking at the control system and the process, and it's able to detect substrate feed composition changes and pH sensor drift. Now, both these issues would be a reason to inspect more carefully the final batch critical quality attributes when the batch is finished. So it's not patient impact, but it is an operational and business impact that will be achieved through a timely intervention. So again, these become medium impact models. It's used in real-time operation of the process plan, and it'll help to improve the overall equipment effectiveness. Okay, so finally, we've talked a lot about models. Now, where do all these models live and interact? So, Perceptive have developed a platform, and it's really to create a home for all the models. Within the platform, every model is verified, it's checked in, it's tracked, and it's monitored either on-site or via a cloud-based remote monitoring system to ensure model integrity and complete traceability. So, I've just covered really a first look at model types, 3 types, and an application within biopharmaceutical manufacturing, hopefully highlighting some of the practical aspects and also linking it to the developing terminology for these systems. Let's now look at how models are used during product development. I'll pass the baton to John, who is Engineering Director at Perceptive. Thanks, John.
Thank you very much, David, and hello, everybody. So yes, as David mentioned, that we'd like to cover in this part our optimized experimental design platform, which is essentially a suite of capabilities for data-driven techniques for control, monitoring, and optimization, and using these data-driven techniques to actually optimize the process, to gain greater understanding during process development, and then potentially taking those models and transferring them into routine manufacturing as we go through the process development phase. So if we have a look at the optimized experimental design platform, this is a capability built upon the PharmaMV real-time system. And it's essentially we're bringing together the tools for Pharma 4.0 combined with the tools for advanced process control, machine learning, and to take those models and to use them to understand the process, to model the process, and then to optimize the process through advanced process control and optimization. So if we look at so we're combining both statistical and mechanistic models for process simulation, as we'd call the digital twin in Industry 4.0 terminology. And then we're using data fusion, so we're aligning, time aligning PAT and process data. Metadata is correctly tagged and time aligned with the process data. And we're connecting to individual unit operations in the laboratory setting. So it could be connecting to circulators, connecting to pumps. We're pulling that together to build a process, and then we're using these tools to actually understand the process in more detail. So moving on from the digital twin and the data fusion, we also have the design of experiments manager. So this is a tool to essentially to execute design of experiments, to detect steady state, to collect offline data through a sampling mechanism, and really to automate the execution of DOEs. We can then move on from the, let's say, traditional QBD approach, and we could take a machine learning approach. And in that case, rather than applying, let's say, a full factorial DOE, we may want to use machine learning and self-optimization to actually evaluate and model the results from our DOE and use them to actually inform and make decisions for our next set of steps in order to actually optimize the process using these self-optimizing techniques, and then also to build statistically rich information that could be used for developing advanced process control from the same data set. The advantage of that is actually you're working with one data set which could be used both for process understanding, for developing calibration models, and then potentially for developing process control models as well. In the top right, we have the automated process response tool. So this is actually allowing us to apply a series of steps to our inputs. In terms of control engineering, we would say this is a process response, a PRBS test, process response binary sequence. And this is really optimized for developing, for generating statistically rich data that can be used for developing advanced process control models. And finally, if we look at the bottom right-hand side of the optimized experimental design platform, here we can see advanced process control, the options for developing the advanced process control itself. So we take a model, we use that model to predict future behavior in the process, to reduce the variability in the critical quality attributes by adjusting the inputs in a coordinated fashion. And then the third stage would be to actually optimize the process using an optimizer to drive the process towards some economic objective. So it's having those workflows and tools combining machine learning with advanced process control and using those tools either for batch or for continuous processes. So let's move on and look at the functionality of the online model adaptation, the model learning tools, and how we would actually develop those for a predictive control strategy. So a process response test is actually quite different to, let's say, a design of experiments test that you may be familiar with, primarily because a DOE, the results from a DOE are not well suited for extracting the dynamics of a process. We need to understand the dynamics, let's say the residence time distributions, the time delays, the lags. The model needs to capture those responses in order for us to have a robust predictive control. So we use process response tests to actually generate the statistically rich information. And that's really is quite different to the DOE approach, where we're looking to explore the operational space of the process. So when we're running a DOE, running a response test, we're actually changing the inputs of the process simultaneously in a pseudo-random fashion. And this can actually be used to generate statistically rich information because the input changes will converge towards white noise and they're completely independent. Now, what we can actually do with model predictive control is we can actually run a model adaptation. So as we're running the tests, we can adapt our model, we can update our model, and this can be used as part of a model maintenance activity. So rather than modeling offline when we've completed the test, we can actually build our model in real time as new data comes into the system. This has a significant benefit because we can monitor the model's performance. As the model converges over time, we can then stop the test. So that means that we can generate a model for advanced process control using the minimum amount of material. So it's very, very efficient particularly if we're doing this at early stage development where raw material costs can be very expensive. So we're building a model as we run the tests, and then we're actually using that for control. And that's really shown in the screenshot here, showing the workflow for response testing. We've applied a series of tests, the model has converged, and then at the last part of the trend, we can see the controller has been activated, and it's then driving the process to its optimum. So we're controlling 2 critical quality attributes at the top. We're adjusting 3 inputs in this case, and we're fully optimizing the process using a model that has been developed through process response testing. So that's really just a small snapshot, a small flavor of how we're using the optimized experimental design platform to combine the Pharma 4.0 tools, machine learning to actually optimize the process to bring it to an optimum, and then using advanced process control to hold the process at that optimum. And the advanced process control, it really works hand in hand with the machine learning. It's able to respond and compensate for raw material disturbances in a feed forward and feedback manner to hold the process at the desired targets and to reduce the final product variability. And with that, I shall pass us back to Stephen for the Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Now we will begin the question and answer segment of the webinar. But once again, I would like to remind our audience that you can still send your questions in via the questions tab located directly below your webinar screen. So now our first question will be, what is the role of PAT in modeling and APC? That question is for you, Sally.
Hi, yes. Thank you so much, Stephen. So I think that the role of PAT or process analyzers, I'm going to be calling them process analyzers just to clarify a little bit what I'm referring, with regards to PAT. Process analyzers can allow you either to see outputs or outcomes, right, in your process. So if it's an output, and when I say an output, it could be a state variable, that should allow you to get more observability into your process. So if you have more observability, it means that you are able to characterize your process better. And then if you do have, if you can actually link that output to causalities that are contributing to that output state, then you can derive a control strategy, right, to control the output itself. So in a nutshell, having more sensors into your process, it's like putting more eyes into your process, and that hopefully should enable more controllability as well. So I think that that's the role of PAT.
Thank you. And our next question is, why for complex systems are you focusing on manufacturing consistency and supply chain reliability, and what does that mean? And that again is for you, Sally. Yes, thanks.
So for complex systems, they have, so how are we defining complex systems first? Complex systems, they have many degrees of freedom. So that means that there are many variables or levels in your process. So in a complex process, usually you don't have a direct relationship between inputs and outputs. You could have relationship between output and output. And those relationships are a little bit more difficult to model and to control. Now, that also brings the problem of having more failure modes on a complex process, because you could have, many higher degree of variables, and that brings just that part of having more failure modes too. So for those processes, we prefer to focus in ensuring that it is within, it is more controlled. So we will increase the number of sensors, and we'll increase the number of fault detections for those to ensure that they are within control. Hopefully generating knowledge, and then, yes, you can generate a more multivariate control strategy if you want, but those models are going to be more complex. So many people talk about real-time release testing as a direct outcome of advanced process controls, and we don't equate that. So what I mean is that we focus more in consistencies, we focus more in the process reliability than just being able to predict the outcome itself. Because to be able to predict the outcome itself, you need to have more assumptions into your process. And sometimes we don't even have the entire observability, or we don't understand very well what are all the relationships that we need to level into or leverage into our more advanced control strategy.
Thank you. Our next question is for David, and our next question is, what does advanced process control using models offer above basic automation?
Okay, thanks, Stephen. Yeah, good question. I'd say that many regulatory control systems operate on single variables. When you're using a model, it's often because the process is sufficiently complex. It's got lots of interactions between both cause and effect and on the outputs. Lots of process variables are interacting with each other. There's often, there are many process constraints that you've got to remain within and kind of navigate through. And there's also multiple ways of controlling that process. One, to ensure it's stable and consistent and with low variability. But also, when you're looking, there's a cost. If there is an economic cost associated with operating the plant differently and still achieving the same process points, the same objectives of your control variables, then that lends itself to a model-based control system and an optimization system. And again, very, very standard. They're becoming more standard in pharmaceutical in lots of different places, but they're very standard in the food and beverage and oil and gas sector. And again, when you're working hand in hand really with regulatory control systems. So 80–90% of the control systems that you have there in other industries are working with single input, single output, proportional integral derivative control loops, but then you're tying those together with some kind of model-based supervisory system. So I think that hopefully that answers the questions. When you've basically ticked all those boxes, you're saying at this point I will probably need an advanced process control system to give me much of an advantage over the standard regulatory control system.
Thank you. Our next question is, what happens if the model is incorrect? And I believe that'll be for you, John.
Thank you, Stephen. An excellent question again. So really, what we have to consider in this case is going back to the looking at the model impact, whether we're working with a low, medium, or high model impact level, and also what are we using that model for. So in all cases, we want to model the models. We want to monitor the model's performance in real time. We need to ensure not only the model accuracy, but what's going into the model. We need to look at, for example, the spectra that's been applied into the model. Has there been a baseline shift? Is there some fault with the analyzer? There are many things that can actually have an influence on the prediction capability, the prediction accuracy of that model. We need to ensure that the process is operating within the space where the model was used to where the model was built. In other words, has the model operates within the space during the training process. So if we're detecting that the model's predictions are outside of our proven acceptable range, we might need to trigger diversion or pause the process. We need some kind of strategy, particularly for real-time release, when we need to react to that issue. If we look at control models, the case is a little bit different, because we know that with feedback, an advanced process control system can actually compensate for errors. And the model structure is a little different as well, because we're using an incremental model as opposed to an absolute model. So it's only looking at the change from one sample to the next, and as long as that is within the model's expected behavior, then the model will be accurate. So there's well-proven and mature approaches from chemical engineering and from process control engineering, where we can monitor the closed-loop control behavior, we can model the prediction performance, and we can model the controller's performance across its prediction horizon. So in that case, the model is a medium impact application, and we're ensuring that we're responding with feedback. But if we go outside our acceptable prediction error, then we may want to deselect the controller, raise an alarm, so on and so forth. In terms of long-term model performance, that should really be put in as part of a continuous process verification program, where we're actually monitoring the controller's performance over time and implementing a model maintenance activity if required.
Thank you. Our next question will be for Saly, and the question is your goal real-time release testing?
I think that real-time release testing is something that we can do once we have drawn the parallels between the fundamentals and the fundamentals of the models and the output itself. So I think that depending on how much assurance you have, right, that your model it's actually modeling the fundamentals, and that you have a robust enough control strategy to create boundaries or control other things that, like raw material perhaps. So I think that once you have that, then you could start thinking about real-time release testing, because you have proven that you understand your process well enough, and that you have control all the sources of variation that could lead to having issues in quality, right? That's usually a little bit easier to be done, or for simpler systems again. For complex systems, that it's a little bit more difficult, because again, you have more degrees of freedom. So other things, more things could be affecting your process. So again, like the real-time release testing could be an end goal once you know that you have control, the right control level, once you know that you have increased your process capability, and once you know that you can trust your control strategy enough to release something to the patient, and using models as surrogates, and your process control as a surrogate of quality.
Thank you. Moving on to our next question is, what do other industrial sectors do with models? And that'll be for you, John.
Yes, thank you, Stephen. So really looking at the other high-value manufacturing industrial sectors, the data-driven and mechanistic models are used extensively. If we look at advanced process control as a technology, this has been around for a very long time, since the mid-70s. It came out from the oil and gas industry primarily. It's also used in the nutritional powders industry, paper, and semiconductors as well. So there's a number of key areas, and similar to pharma in a lot of respects. So primarily we can look at soft sensing. So maybe using a neural network, a mechanistic model, or a statistical model, or even a hybrid to predict quality attributes in real time. So there may be a number of reasons for that. If we can use a soft sensor, we may not need to have the expense and the maintenance cost and the overhead of having a PAT analyzer. So a good example of that would be predicting the powder moisture from the output of a nutritional powder spray dryer. Or we may want to predict, let's say, for example, the NOx content in a boiler exhaust, or the strength of a sheet of paper. So there's lots of applications for using soft sensor models in industry. In advanced process control, we can look at pretty much most refineries and distillation columns would be using advanced process control, model predictive control, plus linear steady state optimization almost routinely. So it's very well established in that industries. And finally, obviously, we're looking at the fault detection aspects as well. So process condition monitoring using PCA, detecting faults on highly complex processes and much quicker and much sooner than we would through the traditional alarming system from a DCS. So we're trying to detect those faults and respond to them in order to avoid the fault escalating into shutting the process. So those are the kind of main areas. So soft sensing, predicting, advanced process control, optimization, and process condition monitoring.
Thank you. Moving on, our next question is to the first gentleman. Would that be David? Referencing a paper. Can they say the paper's name again so they can look that up?
Yeah, sure. Okay, I think it would be the scientific and regulatory considerations for implementing mathematical models in the QBD framework. That's the title. One of the authors was Dora Corti from GSK at the time. I think it was about 2015 or 16, and it was the ISP's process engineering, certainly published within the process engineering magazine. But again, that looking up that title, it can be accessed from the ISPE website, and it's a two-part document, around about 40 pages or so. It's very good.
Thank you. I was just going to say, we'll put that up on your screen shortly, so you should be able to see the full name again if you need it slower. Moving on, our next question is, how do you present the approach mentioned to the FDA? And I imagine that will be for David and John. Shall I answer that question first? Yes,
I can take that one. So I think what we're seeing is a great interaction with the FDA and with the regulatory authorities for advanced process control. We had maybe a landmark occasion this year where we had a specific PD2M workshop focused on advanced process control, and there was a really nice open forum, open discussion as to the application of advanced process control techniques, and I think that the two-way understanding of how do we validate and verify these type of multivariate process control systems? It's important to emphasize that the performance of the model is just one aspect of the entire verification, and we really need to make a performance-based approach to the advanced process control, ensuring that we challenge the controller and through simulations, through the use of digital twins, to show that we can that the controller is stable in the face of model error and mismatch. So it's really showing that this is quite different to, let's say, the validation requirements from a chemometric method. We need to consider both the model and the controller itself. And I think what we're seeing in the industry is, the great thing about model predictive control is it's very well suited to operating within the design space, the defined design space of the process. So we have hard constraints, and we can show the FDA that the controller will operate within these constraints, hard constraints for the manipulated variables, soft constraints for our CQAs, and also how we manage the likes of changes in the confidence limits, changes in our confidence in our sensors, and how we have a robust approach. And also, we really want to focus on bringing in the terminology, the approaches that are well established, over the last 4 or 5 decades from the chemical engineering industries, from oil and gas, and use those to springboard APC into the pharmaceutical sector.
Great, thank you. And our last question for today's Q&A session is, what approach has Biogen taken to validating these models in production systems? And Sally, imagine that question will be for you.
Yes, thank you so much, Stephen. So the approach is really going to depend on the impact that it has. Right now, we do have fault detection implemented in almost every single process that we have. And depending on what's going to be the instruction to the manufacturing associates, that's, depending on what they're going to be doing with the signals, that is what needs to be in reality validated. So right now for DOD, we pretty much have them instructed to go to understand what are the signals that are out, and then depending on which signals are out and depending on what they already have in their batch instructions, that's what they will do. So the instruction is within the quality system already. So depending on the action that they are going to be taking and depending on the quality, and also if we need to make any assumptions, that will be the level of strictness. We also have models for to infer some outputs during the process, and those ones, even though they're medium impact, we have validated them as we will validate a high impact. So we have been very thorough in the validation. Now that it is explained that they are a medium impact. In the future, for some of the other fault detections that we have developed too, which are going to be more quantitative in nature than just qualitative, we are exploring the path of triggering sampling. So instead of like just going and stopping the process and acting directly on the process based on the model, the action is going to be triggering a sample, and then based on the measurement, we can define a path for that. We think that it's a little bit simpler at this point, while we learn as an organization a little bit more about our own processes, and we get more trust into our control strategies. For things that are more at the control level, like sending new signals into or new directives to the controller based on the state of the process and adjusting it like that, it will really depend. It will depend of if all those new directives are sent within the boundaries of what was filed, or if we are filing that as our control strategy, not only as an optimization piece. So it will really depend. There's not just a one approach in reality, because then, for APC, you could have so many different approaches and models and control strategies. So it really depends on how, what you have filed, what you're planning to do the model, and if you are planning to operate within the boundaries of your filing, or if that's what you're going to be filing.
Thank you. Audience members, for your questions, and thank you, presenters, for your answers. Before I finish the webinar, however, I would like to ask our presenters and give them the chance to have any closing remarks for our audience today. So, Sally, do you have any closing remarks for our audience today?
No, I just would like to say thank you so much for your attention. I think that we are in very exciting times in pharma. We are very exciting times in the industry, so just keep on learning. Let's keep on learning about what other industries are doing. Let's keep on finding insights in our data, and let's keep on challenging the status quo with regards to what we do, because our processes are getting more complex, and I think that our patients deserve that we do the best that we can to supply the therapies that they need.
Thank you. And John, do you have any closing remarks for our audience?
Yes, just again, thanks for attending the webinar today. I think we're in a great place in terms of these different tools that we have available to us. I think I'd urge everybody to be open-minded towards evaluating each technology on its merits. Looking at in each case, for the business, is it best to monitor? Is it best to control? Is it best to use a different combinations of these? And it's really looking at these tool sets and using the appropriate methodologies, and also just seeing how we can consider risk and how we can incorporate that into our control systems. There's an awful lot of good things out there, as Sally said, from other industries. and we should leverage that as much as possible to drive business benefit into the pharma sector.
Great. And John, do you have any closing remarks?
Yep, Steve. No, thanks for everyone staying online and for putting together the questions. As John said and Sally said, it is a good time to be doing this stuff. A lot of things happening in this space, and of course we'd be happy to hear from anyone. So drop us a line outside of this, and we're happy to share as much information as we can. I put on the details of that particular paper, so it should be accessible to everyone via Stephen, I believe. So thank you very much.
Great. Yep, that title should be appearing in front of your screen. And what we might do is also attach the link to the actual paper, if possible, after. But I would like to take this opportunity anyway to thank our presenters. Once again, that was Saly Romero-Torres, Senior Manager of Advanced Data Analytics at Biogen, and David Lovett, Managing Director, as well as John Mack, Engineering Director at Perceptive Engineering. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. I would also like to remind our audience that you can view this and other webinars on demand by visiting biopharma-asia.com/on-demand-webinars. And if you are watching this on demand, then please feel free to send your questions over to me at stephen.edwards@biopharma-asia.com, and we'll get those answers sent back to you. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.